Hello and welcome back to the Science Behind That podcast. I am your host, Atticus Hamilton, and for all of you new listeners out there, the Science Behind That is a show where we take a deep dive into the obscure science of everyday life. Into the science of everything from physics to engineering, and biology to zoology, and psychology to anatomy, we take a deep dive. So without further ado, welcome to today's episode of the Science Behind That podcast. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Science Behind That. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about post-workout soreness. And I'm sure that, most of us have experienced this at one point or another in our lives. I know I experience this every day. Less and less now, but every day. And we're going to be talking about what is going on there, and we're also going to be talking about what the process is of muscle growth, because technically muscle cells don't divide. So we'll be talking about that today on today's episode of the Science Behind That. So first off, there are three different types of muscle fiber. There's myocardial fiber, which is the muscle fiber that makes up your heart. There is striated muscle, also called as skeletal muscle, and that's, what you would typically think of as your pectoralis major, your serratus, sartorius anterior, deltoids, bicep brachii, bicep femoralis, etc. Those muscles, the muscles that directly attach either to other muscles or ligaments or skeleture are called skeletal muscle. And they're striated as well, and that's important. What that means is that an individual muscle cell is separated by cell membranes, so it appears as bands throughout that muscle tissue when you put it under a microscope. And then, of course, you have smooth muscle, and smooth muscle is predominantly muscle that takes control of autonomic nervous system responses. And what that means is you have autonomic nervous system and you have the somatic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is everything that is out of your conscious control. Heartbeat, breathing, urination, peristalsis, when you're swallowing something, etc. And then the somatic nervous system is like picking up a bow and pulling it back and, letting the arrow fly. And activating the extensors in your arm and the flexors in your arm and your tricep brachii and your bicep brachii. That is somatic. So somatic is basically everything that you can directly control. Now, when you work out, you are basically tearing your muscles, and I know that sounds scary, but you're forming micro abrasions in your musculature, and what that does is you're tearing the muscle fiber, and then after your workout, what happens is your body will fuse those exposed, torn muscle fibers together and cover it over with keloid. And what keloid is it's scar tissue. And so we're going to break down how this happens. So you're at the gym, right? Let's say you're on the bench press and, normally you bench 105 pounds, but today you're really going, maybe you went on a date with somebody, I don't know, so you're really excited. So you put an extra 50 pounds on the bench press, so now you're pressing 150 pounds, right? 155, I guess. So what's happening? Well, you're laying down, and when you're bench pressing, you're exercising pretty much the main muscles you're exercising are your pectoralis major, your deltoids, your tricep brachii, and your bicep brachii, and those are the muscles of the upper arm. And what's happening is you're forming micro tears in those muscles, and muscles are designed to do that, right? So you're putting your muscles under what's called isotonic contraction. And isotonic contraction is just the act of changing shape to change tension within the muscle, thereby lifting something or doing something. But this process results in, as I said, micro tears. And so after your workout, what happens is that micro tearing of those muscle fibers or myofibrils, that results in a release of a chemical into the blood called a cytokine. Now, diving into what cytokines are released is kind of beyond the scope of my podcast. But as always, if you're curious, you can email me at thesciencebt@gmail.com. Anyway, back to the episode. Cytokines are released into the blood, and those cytokines basically activate a type of stem cell. Now, it's not a true stem cell. It's a muscle progenitor cell, which is just a big fancy word for a cell that attaches to the ripped region of muscle, and it fuses those fibers together, and it fuses those fibers together with scar tissue, or as we say in the medical world, keloid tissue. And so now your next question is, well, Atticus, you say that I'm tearing my muscles when I'm working out, but then, why can I bench more, after a year of doing this? And the reason is because the fused myofibrils, or muscle fibers, and the keloid tissue within the muscles overall increases the maximum tension force that your muscle can tolerate. And it also increases the stability of its isotonic contractions, meaning that the more you work out, the more you tear your muscles, the better they are at maintaining their structure under stress. It's the same principle behind if you're brand new to archery and you start out archery on a 30-pound bow, right? After a while, you're going to be like, all right, this is too light, And so you go up to a 50-pound bow, and it's like, woof, that's really heavy. But after a while, you get used to it because your muscles have adapted to tolerate larger weights and more pressure, more tension force. So that's what happens after you work out. So now let's address this muscle soreness. Muscle soreness can be attributed to two things. One is lactic acid, and two is that very process that we just talked about. Okay? So that very process that we just talked about, which I'm just going to call muscle repair, or post-workout muscle repair, as my name shall imply, it only occurs after a workout. And usually the best time frame for optimal repair of those myofibrils is between 48 and 72 hours after a vigorous workout, unless, of course, you work out like I do every single day. Then your recovery period is much lower because the number of tears in your muscle tissue will be lower as you adapt to constantly using your muscles. And that hurts. I think people often forget that there's a lot of nerves in the muscles. There are a lot of nerves in the muscles. It's definitely something that within anatomy and medicine and surgery we experience a lot, because oftentimes people just don't realize the sheer number of nerves that are embedded in muscle tissue, and there are a lot of nerves in muscle tissue, and so that process of repair, when if you haven't worked out before, it can be a really shocking thing to your nerves, and so your nerves will relay that information to your brain and be like, whoa, there's an issue here. But after a while, it doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore because your body has basically, in a sense, been like, oh, this is a good thing. There's no reason to register this as pain. And then the other reason, as I mentioned, is lactic acid synthase. So muscles don't like lactic acid. They just don't. However, lactic acid is kind of a daily part of exercising unless you have been endurance training forever. And all endurance training does is it acclimates your body basically to tolerating lower oxygen saturation in the muscle tissue. And so when a muscle is producing lactic acid, there's no oxygen. It's undergoing what's called anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, not anabolic. Anaerobic respiration, and that produces lactic acid. And that lactic acid, again, activates those nerves within the muscles, and it tells the body, there's a lot of lactic acid here, this is painful, you need to slow down. And so that's about it. That is the vast majority of what causes post-workout soreness. And that was a very, very, very brief explanation of how muscles repair after a workout and how they get bigger. And I really like this topic because one of my one of my areas of interest, and probably my main area of interest within medicine, is called musculoskeletal regeneration using stem cells. And this topic kind of falls into my little wheelhouse there. But so that's generally how it works. It's a very simplified overview. I hope you enjoyed that short overview. If you guys want to hear more, if you want to hear more about how to, alleviate this workout soreness, if you want to hear more about how the flu can kill you when it infects muscle cells, be sure to email me at thesciencebt@gmail.com and let me know. And if you just like the show, you can email me there too. So thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. It really means a lot to me. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This was fun for me. This is right in my area of interest, area of of expertise. So expect more episodes like this in the future. So once again, thank you everybody. Enjoy your Friday morning, and I will see you all next time. Remember, stand up and question everything.